The Justice League is one of the most famous superhero teams in all of fiction. A union of DC Comics' heaviest hitters to combat the universe's most dangerous foes. While the League would receive acclaimed animated adaptations in Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, a major movie adaptation had yet to release. Except for the 1997 TV pilot, but we don't talk about that. With the success of Marvel's Avengers and the connective MCU, DC Comics' owner, Warner Bros. Studios, wanted to replicate that success, but on a much shorter timescale. Following Batman v Superman, Warner Bros. Studios found themselves in a precarious situation. So before we talk about Zack Snyder's Justice League, we have to talk about its tumultuous production. Leading the DC Extended Universe, Zack Snyder originally planned to create a film quintology centering around Superman, with Justice League as an alleged two-parter. While Man of Steel received mixed reception, BVS was almost universally reviled on release. Warner Bros., eager to nail an Avengers-level success, felt the best course of action was to move away from Snyder's auteur-style, darker thematic films towards a lighter, faster-paced Marvel-style film. This resulted in script rewrites, bringing in Chris Terrio and Jeff Johns, a DC Comics star most known for reviving Green Lantern and The Flash. Then there were conflicts with actors like Ray Fisher, who plays Cyborg. In Snyder's League, Cyborg plays a prominent role, but in rewrites is little more than a side character. There were also allegations of abuses on set. The biggest blow to the film, and its director, would be the death of Snyder's daughter. Snyder would allegedly choose to leave the film to grieve with his family, though there were rumors the studio was looking for more ways to minimize his role for a long time. With most of the movie already filmed, Warner Bros. Got their opportunity to create their Avengers-style film by bringing in the director of the Avengers, Joss Whedon. True to form, Whedon added his trademark snappy dialogue, shortened the film, toned down the violence, and saturated the colors, creating something that, on release, would be blasted by nearly everyone, critics, fans, and haters alike. The film was criticized for its conflicting tone, poor special effects, boring plot, and stale characters. Snyder would never see this version of the film, instead letting his friend Christopher Nolan and his wife watch it. Nolan would allegedly tell Snyder, "Don't ever watch it." Snyder's dream of the Superman epic was dead, its corpse mutilated and buried, better off forgotten. However, Snyder would get a second chance with the director's cut, fittingly called Zack Snyder's Justice League. Snyder went about restoring deleted scenes, axing the majority of Whedon's changes, and of course, desaturating the film to rebuild it into his vision. This version of the film is our focus, and while it's closer to a standard blockbuster than the previous films, we can still find a thematic through line. In Man of Steel, we saw Superman struggle with his adoptive father, Jonathan Kent, urging him to maintain a normal life, to hide from a fearful world to preserve himself. Then there was his birth father, Jor-El, urging him to use his power to be a messiah-like leader of men. And as antagonist, there was General Zod, urging Superman to carry on his people's legacy of mighty conquerors and colonizers. By the end of the film, Superman chooses to use his powers for the greater good as a hero, rather than hiding or being some sort of a king. In Batman v Superman, we saw how reactionary tendencies would push self-aggrandizing Randian-type great men into violent conflict and fascist tendencies. We would see Superman choose the path of democratic altruism, reinforcing the New Deal eras that inspired his creation and a pushback of America's post-9/11 Bush-era reactionary movement. In Justice League, we see a natural progression from a discussion of individuals into a discussion of collectives. Collectives are a major focus of Justice League. The coming together of the League, the temporary alliance in the Age of Heroes, and Darkseid's desire for a unity under his sole rule, turning Earth into a copy of his hellish homeworld, Apocalypse. These collectives are presented in different lights: the willing, the reluctant, the brutal. While Batman and Wonder Woman are already on board to unite the discovered metahumans, it's our debuting heroes who struggle. We start with Arthur Curry, Aquaman. Created by Paul Norris and Mort Weisinger, the character debuted in More Fun Comics number 73 in November 1941. This version is the one popularized and mocked in pop culture. The short blonde hair, orange and green tights, and talking with fish. But Justice League's version of Aquaman pulls most heavily from the version imagined by Peter David in the 1993 miniseries Time and Tide. This Aquaman was more brooding, with longer hair, a beard, and a hook hand. Sans the hook hand and blonde hair, Jason Momoa's Aquaman is almost identical to this version in appearance and attitude. Born of a lighthouse keeper and an Atlantean queen, Arthur is of two worlds. But growing up without his mother creates a feeling of abandonment and hatred for the Atlantean people. This is only exacerbated by Vulko's repeated pleadings for Arthur to take his birthright, the throne of Atlantis, and his mother's trident. Arthur rejects both worlds, choosing to spend most of his time in solitude and drinking. Arthur sharply rejects Bruce Wayne's invitation to the team.
I don't know anyone, anything.
But his altruism can be seen in feeding poor villages and saving shipwrecked sailors. This is a man who values his individuality, wanting to owe and own nothing, but clearly has a sense of responsibility to use his gifts for good. In a similar situation is Victor Stone, Cyborg. The character was created by writer Marv Wolfman and artist George Perez, first appearing in DC Comics Presents number 26 in October 1980. Victor would be maimed by an interdimensional monster, his father Silas repairing his body with cybernetic parts. Cyborg would deal with body issues, survivor's guilt, and a hatred towards his father. This alienation would push him to join the Teen Titans, a team of younger heroes and misfits famously adapted into the 2003 animated series. In 2011, the DC Universe was rebooted into the New 52 era. Victor's accident now involved a mother box explosion, and he would be a founding member of the Justice League, replacing the Martian Manhunter. This version is closest to what we see in Justice League. Victor's accident and turning into Cyborg due to Silas and the Mother Box leaves him unable to live a normal life. He stays isolated even as the cybernetics give him unlimited access to the digital world. We see Cyborg show restraint and responsibility with his powers. While he could launch missiles or destroy the entire economy, he chooses a small act of altruism, hacking the bank account of an evicted woman to give her enough money to keep her and her son off the streets. But just like Aquaman, Cyborg rejects an invitation to the team.
Fuck the world.
We see the same struggle of what to do with his gifts, and also an anger towards a parent. Our contrast to these two is Barry Allen, the Flash. Barry Allen was created by Robert Kanigher and penciler Carmine Infantino for Showcase number 4 in 1956. But he's actually the second character of that name, the original being Golden Age hero Jay Garrick. But we'll put that aside. Barry was conceived as a police scientist who gained his speed when chemicals are struck by lightning and splash on him. Justice League's Flash has his powers before joining the police, still working on a forensics degree, and adds in the Speed Force concept created by Jeff Johns. This is also before Barry's marriage to Iris West. A notable inclusion in the Flash's comics were the Flash Facts, quick bits of scientific trivia relevant to current events. We can see this love of science and technology reflected in Barry's homemade suit and gadgets he has in his home, despite being rather poor. Justice League's Barry works multiple low-wage jobs to pay for his degree in order to help his father, who is wrongly incarcerated for the murder of Barry's mother. Even at the insistence of his father to live his own life, Barry chooses to sacrifice himself against injustice to help his father. When Bruce invites Barry to the team, he enthusiastically agrees.
I'm in.
Flash already embodies the path of Superman and serves as a glue for the team, urging teamwork in battles and often serving to support his teammates. Uniting together is seen as the correct choice. The Justice League is a positive, democratic, altruistic collective. We see a mirror of this in the film's villain, Steppenwolf. Steppenwolf was created by Jack Kirby in December 1972's New Gods number 7. Brother of Hegra, Darkseid's mother, Steppenwolf is uncle to Darkseid and a member of Darkseid's elite, with legions of parademons under his control. While a fairly minor character in comics, he is given the main villain role in Justice League. Here he is on a conquest of 1,000 worlds as punishment for attempting to usurp Darkseid. Steppenwolf previously exerted his individuality, but now serves and lives only for Darkseid. In truth, there is not much separating him from the parademons, beings whose individuality has been totally stripped to reduce them to a hive mind like ants, little more than extensions of Darkseid's will. As an aside, I think a better character for this role would have been Kalibak, who is Darkseid's son. This would have connected the movie's main villains to our other 3 debuting heroes and their issues with their parents as well, but, well, water under the bridge. To understand more about Steppenwolf's goals, we have to talk about his master, Darkseid. Darkseid, like many fascist totalitarians and megalomaniacs throughout history, has an entitlement to rule. The universe should belong to him. He is owed it. Those are his feelings. The anti-life equation, which Darkseid seeks and Steppenwolf finds in the movie, is the purest form of this. Anti-life equation turns its victims into extensions of Darkseid against their will. In some cases, this literally makes them parademons. In others, it's a form of extreme mind control. The equation part is the most interesting part of anti-life. Not because there's an actual series of numbers and functions that would result in an objective proof of universal ownership. In truth, Jack Kirby never revealed the anti-life equation. But it's the idea that there's an objective literal equation of such a thing that's a brilliant commentary on how these types of people think. Darkseid and the rest of the New Gods of Apocalypse represent totalitarian fascism, a political ideology that has morphed and been refined over centuries, but with Jack Kirby's New Gods taking root at the beginning of the 1970s, we'll focus on the 2 most notable fascists at the time, Benito Mussolini and Adolf Hitler. From both, we see nationalistic states setting a single figurehead to near godlike status. There's a rejection of democracy, an enthusiastic promotion of violence, a might makes right type thinking. We see rejections of the rational for emotional, idealistic thinking. Hitler often spoke of pure blood and national pride and degeneracy, all terms of nebulous definition that, when broken down, don't have much science or reason behind them. Fascists give a lot of lip service to logic and reason. They believe that there are natural and proper ways to dictate and structure hierarchies in society, and it just so happens that the top of that hierarchy is whatever group they espouse to be a part of. How convenient. But in reality, there is no equation to prove superiority. These things are decided by social constructs and norms, but this entitlement for the self to rule over all is nothing more than a delusion. The rich are often rich due to generational wealth and exploitation of those beneath them, while the poor are often poor due to generational exploitation, neglect, and even targeted sabotage by the governments and powers that be. There are no purebloods or degenerates. Ideas of racial purity and hierarchies are almost always dictated by a ruling class to exploit a minority underclass for personal gain. If I could define fascism as simply as possible, it would be in-group narcissism as political ideology. Just like the kings and rulers of old who claim to be given divine right to their position, fascists believe in supernatural forces that justify them and dedicate their lives to making everyone else believe in those forces as well, or at least to submit to them. It's fitting that the anti-life equation is portrayed as mind control, an erasure of the self. Because what else besides an induced menticide through propaganda and fairy tales could convince a populace to labor, betray, kill, and put one man as God? The League represents a willful collective of individuals coming together to preserve individuality, while Steppenwolf and Darkseid represent a forced, toxic collective. The union of various groups in the past repelled Darkseid, but they refused to stay united. But if they had stayed unified, Steppenwolf may never have gotten as far in the film. Lives could have been saved. Even in Superman's rebirth, we can see this theme of unions as both his fathers speak as he dons his new suit. Banding together, the League successfully stops Steppenwolf and prevents Darkseid's invasion. They choose to do more than their predecessors by forming the Justice League, staying united against further threats, and plan to expand their collective. Inherent to altruistic collectives is responsibility toward others. Batman feels responsibility for Superman's death and sees it his responsibility to create the League, and eventually revive him from the dead. The Flash sees it as his responsibility to help his incarcerated father. While Aquaman and Cyborg initially reject their responsibilities, they come to use their powers to save the world. It's a sense of responsibility to others that separates the League from Darkseid and positive collectives from negative collectives. It's interesting that Steppenwolf makes his base in a Russian nuclear reactor.
It's toxic. That's good.
This seems a clear nod to the Chernobyl disaster, where in 1986, a Russian nuclear reactor exploded, dousing the area in lethal doses of radiation and infecting the populace of a nearby city. Initially, the official blame was put on the plant operators, but a 1992 report revealed the truth. A cost-cutting design flaw was implemented in the core cooling process that caused an explosive reaction. To save face, the Russian government lied about what happened and the harm it caused. This would end up leading to the radiation issue not being tackled as swiftly as it could have been, and more lives lost. This is a very basic explanation of the event, and anyone interested in a story should read up on it or even watch HBO's stellar Chernobyl miniseries. Here we see another oppressive government included in Snyder's films, just like the tyrants Lex Luthor mentioned in Batman vs. Superman that his father lived under. Cutting corners to reduce cost on the power plant and then obfuscating responsibility, resulting in wrongful imprisonment, sickness to thousands, and information about the whole thing suppressed. Justice League is more of a traditional blockbuster than its predecessors, but still manages to expand upon the themes of the Snyderverse in a natural way. And, unfortunately, it seems like this is all we'll ever get. Despite Snyder wanting a quintology, as of right now, there are no plans to move forward with Snyder's films. But I'd like to take a crack at guessing where the themes of Snyder's next two movies would have gone. To do that, we'll have to look toward the creator of Darkseid and the rest of the New Gods, along with Captain America, the Fantastic Four, and dozens of others. The legendary king of comics, Jack Kirby. Jack Kirby was born Jacob Kurtzberg. He was a pioneer of superhero comics, working alongside people like Stan Lee. However, at Marvel, Kirby felt second fiddle to Lee, and was looking to do different kinds of stories. While writing Thor, he conceived of a Ragnarok event that would kill off the old gods and create a new cast of characters, the New Gods. However, control of this story was taken away from Kirby. DC editor at the time, Carmine Infantino, visited Kirby over a Passover Seder. After seeing his New God concept, Infantino and Kirby struck a deal. Kirby came from Marvel to DC in 1970 and began sewing his New Gods into the DC landscape, starting with introducing Darkseid and Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen. From there would come multiple stories and characters wrapped up in his Fourth World saga like Orion, Mr. Miracle, and the Forever People, all of whom are integral to understanding what Darkseid and the rest of Kirby's New Gods represented. The Forever People were a group of teen New Gods living on New Genesis, the heaven to Apocalypse's hell. They stood in as the New Age hippies of the Fourth World saga. They preached compassion and unity, even for machines such as their mother boxes, which in these stories are living computers with their own feelings and thoughts. Their goal was to combat the oppressive force of Darkseid and his totalitarian quest for the anti-life equation. The free love hippie movement of the 60s also pushed against government overreach, social barriers, and wars, especially the Vietnam War of the time, fighting and protesting to create a world of equality informed and motivated by love and altruism and empathy, rather than profit and entitlement. Mr. Miracle was born on New Genesis, but raised on Apocalypse. While his fellow slaves would consign to their fates, Miracle would endlessly try to escape Apocalypse, often failing and receiving violently harsh punishment. But eventually, he would escape to Earth, even converting a loyal warrior of Darkseid's furies, Big Barda, and making her his wife. Mr. Miracle showed the triumph of the human spirit in both mind and body. Orion was the inverse of Mr. Miracle, Darkseid's son, who was raised on New Genesis. A warrior with a mean streak, Orion's lineage as Darkseid's son would push him towards violence and destruction, often needing the help of a mother box to contain his violent tendencies. In him, we see how even the most violent warrior can be reformed and made stoic in the fight against injustice. With Darkseid set up as the next big bad at the end of Justice League, it's easy to see how the wider Fourth World cast would take stage in the rest of Snyder's quintology. There was in fact a New Gods movie in development at Warner Brothers, but it never seemed to get off the ground. These themes of the individual spirit, altruism, and the battle against fascism are a natural next step in Snyder's movies, and I imagine they would become more overt than they were in Justice League. The Fourth World Saga was planned to span hundreds of issues across multiple titles, but the reactions to Kirby's epic tale was mixed, and the opportunity was denied by DC. Despite this, Kirby's cast of new gods would become long-standing staples of the DC universe, his characters taking on legendary status both on and off the page for DC. The greatest example of this is, of course, Darkseid, who has been featured as a major antagonist in games, cartoons, and now movies. It's not hard to see the parallels between Kirby's Fourth World Saga and Snyder's DCEU films. Snyder's original film was a quintology, while Kirby's Fourth World was meant to span hundreds of issues. Both faced criticisms for their work. Kirby for stilted dialogue, uncanny anatomy, and confusing story concepts. Snyder for his dark tones, long runtimes, and some suspiciously reactive themes. But as said before, Kirby's characters and stories have become revered over time. Where would Marvel be without Captain America, Thor, the Fantastic Four? Where would DC be without its cast of new gods, especially the ever-popular big bad Darkseid? While Snyder did get his Justice League vision realized on HBO Max, it's unclear if we'll ever see what would follow. As of now, DC still struggles to gain a foothold in the cinematic world, with the recent Black Adam massively underperforming and a reshuffle putting James Gunn into the role of head honcho. Most of the established DC Universe cast has been removed, even Henry Cavill's Superman, which was recently teased as making a comeback. While Snyder may never finish his quintology and may never shake off his critics, I firmly see Snyder as a great filmmaker with a massive vision who understands the raw parts and pieces that make these characters so iconic, and form them into fresh but consistent forms. Let me know if these videos have changed your perspective on Snyder's DC trilogy. And as always, #RestoreTheSnyderverse.